Clare Weston had spent her life in quiet resilience. A hard-working waitress in a small-town diner, she juggled endless shifts to cover bills and her mother's mounting medical expenses. Life had never been easy, but she kept pushing forward, finding solace in simple moments. She had always believed her mother, Eleanor Weston, was just a kind-hearted schoolteacher, until one fateful morning changed everything. A chance encounter with billionaire James Callaway revealed a past she never knew existed, dragging Claire into a dangerous web of secrets, betrayal, and a fight for the truth her mother had died protecting. Before continuing to the story, please don't forget to like and subscribe to us for more interesting stories. The diner bustled with the usual morning rush. Coffee poured, conversations hummed, and plates clattered. But for Clare Weston, it was just another exhausting shift. The tips were small, the bills were growing, and her mother's medical expenses had left her drowning. She forced a smile as she approached the last customer at table 7, a man she recognized immediately, James Callaway, Billionaire CEO. His face was on magazine covers, but now he sat alone in a small-town diner, stirring sugar into his coffee like any ordinary man. Claire picked up the coffee pot to refill his cup, then froze. On his forearm was a tattoo, Eleanor Weston, her mother's name. Claire's pulse pounded. Why did he have it? James noticed her hesitation, his sharp blue eyes studying her. She forced herself to speak. "Sir, I don't mean to pry, but why do you have my mother's name tattooed on your arm?" A long silence followed. James set down his cup, his expression unreadable. "You knew Eleanor Weston?" His voice was steady, but there was something beneath it, something more. Claire swallowed. "She was my mother." James inhaled sharply, his posture straightening as a realization dawned. "I need you to sit down," he said quietly. "There's something you don't know." Her hands trembled as she pulled out the chair across from him. James glanced at his tattoo. "Your mother wasn't just Eleanor Weston to me. She was someone who saved my life." Claire frowned. "My mother was a school teacher. She lived in this town her whole life." James met her gaze. "She wasn't always meant to." Claire's stomach twisted. "What are you saying?" James exhaled. 35 years ago, I was a runaway, alone, starving. Your mother found me. She gave me food, shelter, hope. But there was a reason she never told you about me. She was protecting you." A chill ran down Claire's spine. "Protecting me from what?" James's expression darkened. "From a man named Victor Langston." The name sent an eerie shiver through her. "He was powerful, dangerous. He ruined lives. And your mother was the only one who stood up to him. She spent years keeping you safe. But now that she's gone, he knows you exist." Claire's hands clenched into fists. "What does he want from me?" James's voice was grave. "Revenge. Leverage. He thinks you have something valuable. Something your mother hid." "I don't," Claire whispered. James leaned forward. "That won't stop him." Her breath came in shallow gasps. James placed a black folder on the table. "Your mother left behind records of Langston's crimes. If he thinks you have them, we can control the game." Before Claire could process, the diner's door swung open. The bell jingled. A man in a dark suit stepped inside, scanning the room with a predator's gaze. James tensed. Victor Langston had arrived. Victor smirked as he approached. "Eleanor's little girl, all grown up." James subtly shifted to block Claire. Victor's gaze landed on the folder. "That's what I want." Claire gripped it tighter. "And if I don't give it to you?" Victor chuckled. "Then I'll take it." A sharp click. Claire stiffened. A second man stood behind her, a gun pressed to her ribs. James moved in a blur. He flipped the table, sending coffee and documents flying. Claire twisted out of the gunman's grasp, elbowing him hard. A gunshot shattered the diner window. James lunged at Victor, slamming him against the counter. Claire ducked, searching for the folder, but a second attacker grabbed her wrist. She twisted and drove her knee into his ribs, breaking free. James had Victor pinned, but the crime boss smirked. "You think this ends with me?" James hesitated. Victor took advantage, slashing a knife across James's arm. Claire gasped as blood bloomed on his sleeve. Victor staggered up, wiping his mouth. "This was never about the files." His cold gaze landed on Claire. Your mother took something from me, and you know where it is. A memory sparked in Claire's mind. Her mother's storage unit. Victor saw the realization on her face and grinned. Ah, there it is. James grabbed Claire's hand. We need to move. Victor straightened his jacket. Midnight, he said. Bring it to me, or I burn your world to the ground. As Claire and James rushed to leave, she saw someone familiar standing beside Victor's men. Her breath caught. Mason, her childhood best friend. The boy who used to share sandwiches with her. Now he was standing beside the enemy. Their eyes met. He mouthed something silently. Don't trust James. Claire's blood ran cold. The real enemy revealed. They sped to the storage unit. Her hands shook as she unlocked it. Inside, buried beneath old boxes, was a metal case. James pried it open. Documents, bank records, a ledger, hush money payments, with her mother's name. Claire's breath hitched. A trap. Her mother had baited Victor years ago. Headlights flooded the unit. James's voice was sharp. They're here. Gunfire erupted. James tackled a gunman. Claire ducked behind crates, gripping the case. Victor strode forward, gun in hand. It's over, Claire. She met his gaze. Number, it's over for you. She pressed send on her phone. Every document was now with the FBI. Victor's face twisted in fury. But then, Mason appeared, gun in hand, pointed at James. Claire's breath caught. Step away from her, James, Mason ordered. James didn't move. Mason, you don't understand. Mason cocked the gun. No, James, I do. You've been lying to her. Claire's heart pounded. Mason, what are you talking about? Mason's jaw tightened. Victor wasn't lying. Your mother didn't just take something from him. She took something from James. Claire's blood ran cold. James's face darkened. This isn't the time. Mason threw a file at Claire's feet. It was full of pictures. Of her mother. Of James meeting with Victor. Years ago. James exhaled sharply. I didn't want you to find out this way, he muttered. Claire's world spun. James? James's expression hardened. You wanted the truth, Claire? He picked up the gun Victor had dropped and aimed it at Mason. Here it is. A choice that changes everything. Claire had seconds to react. Who could she trust? She reached for the gun Mason had dropped. Her hands didn't tremble anymore. The war her mother fought wasn't over. But now Claire held the final piece, and she would decide how it ended. Claire's grip tightened on the gun. Her mother had spent years protecting her, and now the truth was clear. James and Victor were two sides of the same coin. James smirked. You don't have the nerve. She fired. The bullet struck his shoulder. He staggered, eyes wide. Mason seized the moment, knocking James to the ground. Sirens wailed in the distance. Claire's message had worked. Victor tried to run, but Mason shot him in the leg. He collapsed, screaming. As the FBI swarmed in, Mason turned to Claire. It's over, she exhaled, the weight of the past lifting. Months later, she stood at her mother's grave. You saved me, she whispered. Mason joined her. Now it's your turn to live. She nodded, stepping into the sun, finally free.